Hello, this is Steve Goad with the Open Seas Technology Innovation Hub at Otamin University. I'm with Jerry Cronin, our Executive Director, and today Jerry will be presenting on how to do outreach to industry and stakeholders. Jerry, go ahead.
Thanks, Steve. Hello, everybody. As always, good to have you listening in virtually or asynchronously or whatever. Pleasure to be here. As Steve said today, we're going to be talking about outreach to industry and to stakeholders. This is all being done as part of support for the Department of Energy and their SBIR STTR program, which is America's Seed Fund, where they're looking for innovations that'll solve critical problems for the world. So they can sponsor them, the research can get up and going, but then, just as importantly, that they see the light of day. They become real, they become a business, they become a sustained solution out there in public. For those of you who are listening in February of 2024, this particular SBIR STTR, the due date for the application for phase one is the 12th of March. So we're only a few weeks away on that. That said, there'll be releases next year. The Department of Energy has all sorts of challenges around these topics throughout the year. So stay posted. This applies to all of it. Here's today's agenda. As with everything, we'll talk about why it's important. Then we'll get into stakeholders, types of conversations you're going to have with them, how you hunt the elusive stakeholder, which is kind of a work of art or an art in and of itself. And then we'll speak to letters of support and letters of commitment, which you'll need as you go forward with SBIRs, STTRs, and even as you're going out after various challenges or funding for the particular things you're doing. They're all good things. At the end of our presentations, we always give a couple of slides, which are assistance and resources. These are posted on the OpenSeas hub.org site. So you can find these presentations and you can link out to the different assistance and resources associated with this program. So why is this important? And we start out all of our slides, all of our discussions with this particular thing. The SBIR STTR program is having an increased concentration on making sure that what gets invested in by the US government ends up going out into the world and providing the great value that it was designed to do. So Congress is in both Congress and the agencies intend that your products and your projects that you develop out of here, if you're successful and they prove out that they work and that there's a market, that you end up seeing them going out either as sales to the federal government or out into the commercial and private sector. There's a renewed focus on this. And our favorite rant is, we tell this with everybody we deal with at OpenSeas, the time to start thinking about commercialization and sustainment is at the very, very beginning. We'll talk a little bit later on about why that's so and how you do that. But by doing that, you increase the probability of success. And I'm pretty sure everybody watching this, that's what you all want. Why stakeholder input's important? They help you create and validate your value. If there's no value, you're not going to get any kind of awards, whether from the government or from whomever else. There's no value, there's no way of putting a business into place. And if there's no value, there's no way of sustaining that business. Somebody's got to keep the coffers filled and money coming so the thing gets sustained. Value is extremely, extremely important. And it's totally in the mind of the customers and stakeholders. I've said this a number of times in these presentations. I have made the mistake of thinking, this is the greatest thing in the world. Everybody's going to want it. 26,000 lines of brilliantly written code later, we launch it out into the marketplace and nobody wants it. Okay. If I'd known then what I know now, it would have been a different situation. I probably would have stopped on that particular project and used the bandwidth for something else. So value and impact are in the mind of your customers and the minds of your stakeholders. So let's talk about the types of stakeholders out there. It can be a pretty broad population, actually. There's, sometimes there's the obvious ones and sometimes not so obvious. You talk about users, okay? Users would be the folks who directly use your particular application or your solution, okay? And it could be a bunch of them. We'll talk about that in a couple of slides. But the users are the direct users, they're day-to-day using the stuff you got going there. Your second set of stakeholders, and an important set too, the buyers. Who's going to pay for it? All right. If you're going to an agency, the guys out in the field might really, really want what you're talking about, but it's got to get through the procurement process. If you're taking something to a company, the guys at the front end of the company might like it a whole heck of a lot, but you got to get past the chief financial officer and the purchasing people. So they're a stakeholder that you got to understand. Other things that we call enablers. Who else is necessary for this thing to deliver value? So you might have some folks who are supposed to provide data that then drives and makes your particular solution work. They're an enabler of your particular solution. Enablers would also be, say you're manufacturing a hardware device. Okay, an enabler would be going out and talking to the guys who are, if you're not manufacturing it yourself, the folks are going to manufacture it for you. Okay, you got it, especially when you're validating your business model. Are they really available to build these things? How many do I have to send to them in order to get the right pricing? If I'm only building one at a time, how much is that going to cost me? And a lot of times in the scientific world and the early stage world, when you don't have a lot being produced, that could be a pretty significant cost. Beneficiaries, who benefits from it? So it might not be, say filmmaking or something. You invent a suite of software that enables you to edit a lot better. Beneficiaries it might be the general public, the movie-going public. Okay, they're not folks who directly pay you money, but they're benefiting from it. If you're talking environmental things where you say dropping carbon out of the atmosphere, got a lot of beneficiaries there, but they might be pretty removed from your particular business case, and they're probably not the guys paying for it. But they are the guys who are influencing the folks who are going to pay for it, maybe putting pressure on them to do it. Impacted communities, very, very important. Okay, if you've got a solution that's going to go out there and say you're establishing a shoreside facility to process something, how does that affect the communities where this thing's going to be located? Okay, it's very, very good to have this particular solution, but now I've got to build a plant. Where is it going to go? It's got to sit somewhere. How does it affect that community? And the last type of stakeholder that we'll talk about a little bit here are the funders. They're not your users. They're not really your buyers. They're not buying it. What they're doing is they're investing in it, or they're funding it. So if it's a venture capital, they're putting money into it because they're expecting to see some kind of really good return. If it's a bank, they're not expecting venture capital returns, but they're really expecting that you pay them back their money with some interest. If it's friends and family, or your Aunt Mary or your Uncle John, they might be expecting something back too. Those are stakeholders also. So to come up with something where you don't have an idea of how the darn thing's going to be funded, that's problematic. And that happens sometimes with SBIRs. They get to the end of phase 2 and, oh gosh, where's the funding going to come from? That's why you work this kind of thinking in at the very, very beginning. Okay, I want to talk about two things now. First, one's called network effects. And really the reason we talk about this is it'll go and impact who you should consider talking to. So what a network effect is, your solution only delivers value if multiple people or organizations use it. And the prime example of this is a telephone, right? Or say a cell phone maybe, but let's go with telephone, back when they were hardwired and stuff like that. A telephone that only has one user is near on next to useless. Who are you going to talk to? Okay, you need multiple people out there, and the bigger the network grows, the more valuable that particular solution is because it's sellable to a bigger and bigger population. Another example of this would be adoption of common operating or financial standards. So I know in the maritime world, as in other worlds, folks are always trying to come up, well, it's a standard so these two systems can talk to one another. All well and good, but if everybody's not using that standard, then you don't get the network effects, the network benefits of things being able to talk to one another. So what are the implications? Well, if you're going out and doing discovery, we'll get a little bit more into what discovery and sales conversations are all about. But remember, the basic thing about discovery is you're trying to learn, right? The implication for discovery, if you talk about something with a network effect, is you have to avoid a narrow solution. So you just don't go out and talk to one person who might use it. If it has to be used by a broad section of the population, a broad section of a scientific community, a broad section of a commercial community, you have to talk to a good enough sample across that community to know that they're actually going to adopt it, that the features and benefits and all those things you're designing into it are of value to all those people. So you get more people buying, so you get your network effect. So you got to talk to more people to establish that broad enough value. In science, you sometimes talk about a point solution, right? It's a solution that works right here, but it might not work in the next town over or the next situation over. You want to try to avoid point solutions. You're looking for things that solve large problems in markets. Okay? Implications for sales. For network effects, it means you better be planning on how you're going to be reaching a large market. Okay, to really bring value to your solution, you got to get out to a lot of people. So how do I reach those people? And the other thing is the notion of gaining market traction quickly. Okay, because again, it's only valuable if other people are using it. If I have a telephone and only one other person is using it, pretty limited value. The more people that get added in there, the more quickly I kind of build the groundswell that I've got a valuable solution going. So that affects stakeholders. You got a lot more stakeholders when this is what has to happen. The other thing to think about, what you call multi-sided platforms. Some of the solutions you're going to come up with require more than one element in order to deliver value. You need multiple types of users. And a good example of this would be something like Etsy. Etsy is a marketplace where creators can started off where creators such as knitters, potters, artists, all those other kind of folks could sell their things online. It's also a place where other folks could go and buy those things online. So the folks who run Etsy have what you call a two-sided platform. You need both sides. If there are no buyers, if you can't attract a buyer community, then it really doesn't produce value to the creating community. And if the buyers go in there and they don't find anything that really gets them excited or makes them want to put it in their living room and that type of thing, then they're not getting value out of it either. So in a multi-sided platform, you got to be thinking, oh, okay, how do I talk to both sides of those things to happen? An example I can think of is a project we're working on related to disaster recovery after things like hurricanes and things along those lines. All right, it speeds up the repair of houses, particularly for underinsured and non-insured people. There were three sides to that platform. One, at least in the operational standpoint, there are the nonprofits who go out and fix houses, okay, but they're not going to basically run this system or house this system or stuff like that necessarily. You've got the localities who aren't repairing houses, but they're the natural ones who have all the data necessary to and the people necessary to maintain the system. And the third part of it is the federal government who wants this stuff to happen, and it's also the payer. So in that case, you just can't talk to one of those sets of folks and say, oh, I've done my outreach to industry and I've done my discovery with my stakeholders. You have to hit each and every one to make sure there's sufficient value, and also inform yourself if you need to make any changes. This particular group likes this particular part, but this other group doesn't care about that particular part at all. What they need is maybe a reporting mechanism. Maybe they need some other element. Maybe they need a little bit different piece of data. You only find that when you identify those folks as users and you identify those folks as stakeholders. Same thing with power generation, okay? I can go and I can, put solar cells in my backyard. I can put them on my roof, or I can make some sort of thing, maybe my swimming pool. I invent something where I roll out on my swimming pool and it charges up, all right? If the business model is I store it all on my own property, that's one thing. But if the business model is then that I have to sell it into the system via something like a power agreement, I now have a multi-sided platform. Okay, I've got a power purchaser, I've got a power producer, and now I'm finding a way to tie all that stuff together. So again, implications for discovery, which remember, these are the conversations which are all about learning. You got to talk to all sides that are necessary to make that platform work, and you have to establish value. Your solution has to create value for all those sides. The implication for sales is you need to market and need to sell to all the parts. Okay, so Etsy has to market to creators in addition to marketing to folks who are looking to buy that kind of stuff, right? If you think about Uber and Lyft are not only marketing themselves as the platform of choice for you to pull out your phone when you're at the airport, they're also marketing heavily to try and find new drivers. I'm getting old, and for some reason on their list for, hey, you want to make some extra money. I'm sure they're figuring out a demographic of folks near retirement is a good place to do for that. But notice they're doing both sides, multi-sided platform. So let's talk about the types of conversations you're going to be having with people as you're doing this outreach to industry and stakeholders. It's really two types of conversations when it comes down to it. You've got discovery, okay? And discovery is all about learning. Excuse me. Discovery is all about learning. How do people think? How do they feel? How do they decide? What's painful for them? What frustrates them? All those types of things. And you're looking at the potential customers and the stakeholders' business, understanding that, or their operations. If it's not a commercial business, it might be a government operation, and you're understanding needs. And the last thing you're trying to understand is what they value. So you shouldn't be taking your stuff, putting it in front of them and saying, hey, what do you think, right? You're really trying to ask broader questions to understand the things we just talked about. That's a discovery conversation. The other type of conversation you can have is a sales conversation. And in a sales conversation, what you're trying to do is you're trying to lead somebody to make a decision. It might be a buying decision. It might be a funding decision. It might be you want them to join and become part of your two-sided platform, okay? But it's you coming to them with something you've designed and you've validated through discovery, and you've built some versions of and all that other kind of stuff to get some traction, right? You're coming to them, and based upon what you know about that customer segment and those people, you're trying to present a compelling case for them to make a decision to do the things we just talked about. So think of it this way. Discovery, it's all about learning. You should be a blank slate. You should just be in there as a curious person. Sales, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get them to do something, which is an entirely different thing. So the type of conversation you have depends on where you are in the development cycle of this particular opportunity or this particular thing. And if you look at the little chart there, and if you think of the blue being discovery and the sales being the orange, you'll notice all throughout the entire life cycle of your solution, you're going to be doing both. The only thing that happens is it changes a little depending on where you are, but you're always having those types of conversations. Early on, you're more about discovery. You're trying to find out what's going on. Later on, you're all about sales, and then there's a crossover. So during the assessment phase, the majority of what you're going to be doing is discovery, okay? You're discovering how the market segments, what that market segment's all about. You're really concentrating initially on, okay, what do they value, right? And once you know that, you're trying to figure out how can I build a business model and validate and check out that the assumptions I'm making in my business model will all work, all right? That's the majority of what you're doing in the early parts of your development. But think of it. You also have some sales conversations going on. Not as many, but you have some going on. And you see what you're trying to do there. Early on in your development, you're trying to bring on teammates and early stage supporters. So you're trying to sell a dream, You're trying to sell a future thing that doesn't exist, but paint enough of a picture of what it is so they make a decision to come and join you or support you in some form or fashion. So think about it. We talked about this in a previous session. 2 major failures, reasons for failure of startups and all that. Number one is not money. It's not money. The first one is product market fit. All right. And you handle the product market fit with the top section there, which is talking discovery. You don't make a bunch of bad assumptions and go marching down the road to them. Item number two is you don't have a sufficient team, i.e., you don't have the talent set and the group of people to carry the vision forward and make the whole thing work. That's sales. All right. What you're doing is you're trying to convince somebody to come in, especially if you're a pure startup where you don't have any business going to begin with, right? Just this is what you're starting with. You're now trying to convince somebody to take part of their life and their energies and their sweat and toil and joy and frustrations and all that and share those with you for some return, but not exactly established at the very beginning. The other thing you're doing early on is you're gauging the early interest of some investors. So you know enough about something you think you might know where folks are. So you're checking with people saying, hey, what's the interest? So it's a little bit of discovery, but you're talking about what you're doing to these guys. You're not trying to find out their pains and their gains and about the business. You're trying to find out if they're the right folks you should be talking to and keeping apprised of the situation as you take your effort forward. Now, during the development phase, and the development phase is, okay, I've got my business model, I've got my value proposition. Now I'm going through and I'm trying to come out with my pilot projects, my minimal viable product or project. I'm making adjustments. You know, we talk about agile development where you get an early version out there and you iterate. Okay. Very, very important as you're doing that. Discovery is where you're getting your feedback. So you're trying to find out, okay, of the features we have out here, what works for you? What didn't work for you? What didn't you need at all? What would you have wanted to see to make this of significant enough value for you to use that we don't have in there right now? Those are discovery type questions. They're learning type things. And all throughout, you're continuously validating what you understand about your value proposition. And you're continually validating any kind of assumptions and checks you need to do within the business model that's going to be necessary for delivering that value proposition, creating the value, delivering the value, and just as important, harvesting some of that value to keep your operation going. Now, during the development phase, you also have some sales conversations going on. You're probably still bringing on more teammates, all right? That's number one. Two, you're also looking for places where folks will give you some kind of commitment or support for a place to launch your minimal viable product. The first thing you come out with that you can start getting real life feedback from your users. Ongoing pilot projects and trying to find some of your early adopters. Those folks are saying, hey, yeah, I'll give this a shot. That's sales because you're telling them about what you have. You've hopefully aligned the value proposition, and they're deciding to basically support your thing by bringing it into their operations and giving it a shot. Also, during the development phase, now you're trying to obtain funding. Okay. Early on, you were trying to find out if the ground was good for doing it. Now you're going out and you're doing pitches. You're talking to your bank. You're talking to your Aunt Mary and John, or maybe some private folks and all that other kind of bit. But you're doing a sales discussion to try to bring funding into your operation. If you're in a larger company that exists already, maybe you've got an engineering firm or a research firm or something that has multiple lines of business and you're starting up a new one, obtaining funding can be internal. It might be going to the leadership of the company or maybe the program review board or something like that, the portfolio management board, and you're selling your project and what you're doing into that board so you can get funding from the company to continue developing that particular line of business. So development phase, you start seeing the numbers, you start seeing a shift. It starts reducing the discovery conversations, starts going up on the sales conversations. And finally, last, in your sustainment phase, okay? Sustainment phase is you got your final solution out there, you got your final product out there. Now you're sustaining it as you go along. Discovery does not disappear. Discovery never disappears, just like sales never disappears. It's just the balance. The sustainment phase, most of what you're doing is selling, okay? Research and development stuff, that's another part of your company, or that's your internal R&D operation going on. The last thing you want is those guys keep on messing around on the product you're selling and keep changing the motor windings and all that other kind of stuff. No, you need to come out with a product that you can replicate, you can sell, you can get the stuff out there. Okay, so during this phase, you're selling your solution and you're expanding your footprint out there in the market. You're bringing on additional personnel to grow business. You know, in a tight labor market, you know, talent's hard to get. You know, talent's real hard to get. So you have to do some selling to get people saying, hey, this is a company I want to come and work for. It's good people, plus they're doing really, really important work. And you're also doing sales. You're also obtaining funding, you know, and actually that'll kind of go on forever when you're dealing, you might be dealing with banks versus venture capitalists, or maybe if you're looking for your next growth phase, you might be looking for additional investment, or, you know, if you go really, really far, it might be talking to the stock market or something along those lines, but you're still selling, okay? And you're still doing discovery, except it's a lot less than you're doing the sales at this point in time. Discovery is still important. Remember, discovery is learning. Don't lead the witness, right? So what you're trying to do is find out their opinion about their satisfaction around how you delivered value to them, okay? And what that's going to do is going to help you continually validate your value proposition and your business model. And quite frankly, in a fast-moving technological world, prevent you from marching down the road, not paying attention to this stuff, and then getting ambushed by a new technology or a change in the market where all of a sudden your buggy whips to whip the horses don't matter anymore because you're driving cars. You know, your ears to the ground, you're paying attention to the market, paying attention to the clients, looking for any new entrants into the market and what they might be bringing differently from what you have. That's discovery. That's not sales. And you're looking for future enhancements. You get out version after your MVP, you get out version, say, 3.0 of your solution. That's the one that you're going to keep cranking out of your production facility, keep it going and keep delivering it, so on and so forth. But you're doing discovery activities to find out, hey, what should 4.0 look like? That's discovery. So going back here, again, that curve. Early on in the life cycle of something you're bringing out that's new, you're doing a lot of discovery. As you get more into development, that line shifts, that you've got more sales stuff going on. And finally, when you're up and going full bore, you're doing a lot of sales, okay? Because you're trying to grow, you're trying to get your stuff out there. And we talked about this in a previous session. These are what I consider the golden targets. You know, if you're going to talk to folks, you're presenting, depending on what they value, and these are really three different versions of the same value proposition. They're all providing value across the spectrum. But one is you're leading to the business guys, you're leading to folks who care a lot about the money part, good solid economic value, which also creates environmental and social. Or somebody different might say, you know, they're green, so environmental is most important to them, but you're also creating social and economic. And the last one, you know, they're more about the social stuff, all well and good, but need to create at least economic value, and environmental value on top is excellent also. So to know what all those different sets of value means you got to talk to the stakeholders. You got to talk to the stakeholder. You might have a hypothesis, you might have a thought, but validating it is important. And one of the things I always counsel and tell people is really important to do, have a plan for doing it. Kind of take a pad, open up a spreadsheet, open up a mind map, whatever your favorite program is, and work out these things. What don't I currently understand about my customers and stakeholders and their business itself and their needs? Same thing with their experience. And then the last one is, hey, I've got this value proposition and I've got this business model to deliver it. What am I assuming here? What don't I absolutely know? Which means it's just my informed opinion. I've talked to people and I've researched it and I know it for a fact. You say those are the questions, then how am I going to answer them? Who can answer them, right? How do I reach them, which we're about to talk about? And put yourself together a little script and give yourself a timeline. All right, give yourself a timeline. So planning becomes important. Now, hunting the elusive stakeholder. How do you find it? It's like hunting wild beasts. You got to ask yourself 3 questions. Where do they live? They live in a cave? Do they live in a little den like you see down in the bottom left there? Where do they go and hang out? Okay, bears in Alaska, they hang out in streams, they eat salmon. If you want to find bears, go to a salmon stream in a lot of places, okay? And how do we know they've been there? How do, what kind of trails and tracks do they leave? And on the bottom right-hand side is a deposit of berries and other stuff from a trail. Okay, so where do they live? Where do they go? What kind of trails and tracks and evidence do they leave? So, where do they live and sleep? People work in companies or they're part of organizations. In the case of communities, they live in houses. They live in residences somewhere. So how do you find folks? You call the companies. Okay, if my particular solution is going to be aimed at reducing the cost of, say, filtering waste, or it's going to be cutting down the repair cycle or maintenance cycle on solar panels or whatever, who in the company would do that? Give them a holler. Look it up in directories for the companies and things like that. And LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a marvelous tool. Okay, you can find people through that way. Send them a note. Odds are you won't get a lot of responses back, but you will get some, which means it's a numbers game. You got to put a lot of queries out there, and you might have some folks who are going to come and talk to you. So that's one place. Where do they live and sleep? Spend their days, right? Sometimes it's easier to deal with them where they hang out. All right. Now, where do they hang out? And I just came up from a ocean data conference down in New Orleans. It was filled with all sorts of people I wanted to talk with. Okay, professional and trade associations. Okay, if you go online or you look into the press and things like that, you find interest in working groups. So, for example, we're looking at some stuff having to do with safety at sea. There are interest groups in the cruise line industry who specifically deal with safety at sea. So if I have a solution in that area, I'm going to go that way. If I want to find somebody who's dealing with discharge of waters or something like that, there's health, safety, and environmental folks who are associated with those places, and they usually have an interest or working group. And then conferences. Like I said, I was down in New Orleans last week. It was a conference, a lot of fruitful conversations with people, and I was in discovery mode. Right, I'm really not pitching anything at that point in time. I went down that purely in discovery mode to get a better understanding of what was going on. Now, some little helpful hints. When you go to a conference, attend that conference with a game plan. What do I mean by that? Okay. Conferences usually have an agenda that they set up, saying what's going to happen, who's going to be speaking, and things along those lines. Some conferences even publish a list of attendees ahead of time. Getting that and saying to yourself, hey, I want to talk to this person from that agency, or I want to talk to somebody from that company or that organization. They're part of the panel that's happening on day 2 in Hall B. All right. You get to know what they look like. Most of these places have coffee breaks and things like that. You just kind of sidle up to folks and you're friendly. That's a good thing to do. Another way to find these kind of stakeholders, looking for citations in proceedings of different conferences. All right, they list who was there. They list they list what they spoke on. Contacting them after the conference and saying, hey, great, I really liked your presentation. I'm doing some work in that area. I'd like to catch a few minutes of your time to talk about a particular item. And in the case of communities, if you're going out and doing outreach to communities, think civic leagues, shopping malls, even. Where are the local shops? You might just be doing man on the street type stuff. Again, depending on the thing you're working at. If you're looking for adoption of solar panels for residential areas in the mountains of Virginia, okay, you go to the places in town where people talk, and you strike up some conversations, or you might even hold a little information session or something along those lines. But you look for people where they are. And then what kind of trails and tracks do they leave? And it's not berries and other things that we're talking about here. Journals and publications are wonderful for this type of stuff. It also starts telling you who's who in the field and who you need to talk to. And as you're looking through this stuff, I find it very enlightening because I find things that I was making assumptions on from a technical standpoint that somebody else had a different take on, or in some cases, after spending a really excited day brainstorming a potential solution, then we're doing our homework, finding out 15 people are doing this already and they're doing it well. Let's pivot, let's shift someplace else. News articles are good. And a lot of times I know I subscribe to, and there's tons of these for any particular industry. You kind of get news alerts. So I deal a lot with energy and maritime things. So I get things showing up in my box that are just summaries of news of different things going around the country and the world. Great source of finding out who people are. And then you get them through LinkedIn, or you call their organizations, get in touch with them some way. Or a lot of times you find out they co-authored a paper with somebody you know, or they've worked with somebody you know, and you've got an introduction there. And the last is general writings. Some stakeholders you want to talk to. I did this when I was at Computer Sciences Corporation. We'd go after certain parts of large contracts and things along those lines, and you'd find out that one of the people who's is part of the program, has 2 books out on the subject. Yeah, it's well worth your while to read those books and then get a hold of them. Then you have something to talk about. It shows you care. So, a lot of information. This is all meant as an overview. Okay, we've got one-on-one sessions. You can go to the OpenSea's website, sign up for a dojo, or sign up for some one-on-one time. It's all good. Last part we'll talk about is letters of support, letters of commitment, which on some of your SBIR submissions and some of your challenge submissions that you're going after, and even some of your commercial things, these are good things to have. And so we'll talk about those for a little bit. Okay, letters of support. Okay. The big thing letters of support do for you is they say to the reviewers, they say for the people who are reviewing your proposal or doing a down selection or something like that, it's indicating some level of validity that you are who you say you are, or what you're talking about doing is a good idea. So they might do the interest in your concept, all right? Where a company says, hey, this is an important problem for us that kind of hits market need too. Okay, we are very interested in this concept because this would solve a problem we have, or this is very important to our industry. So a market need and an interest of it, the importance of the problem you're solving. Okay. Another thing it also validates is, you've got a relationship with certain organizations and places. So, okay, these guys are hooked in with this particular company that's doing a bunch of work, or this particular government or agency or something along those lines. Particularly when you're doing a state agency and you're going after a federal contract, it's awful helpful to have the state guys give you a letter saying, hey, we're on board with what they're doing. We'll support them. On you go. Okay. And also potential for collaboration. So when I get letters of support, a lot of times I'm getting letters of support from folks who say, hey, this is important, and we look forward to collaborating with OpenSeas as we go forward to help them solve or help the industry solve this particular problem. Okay. Typically, they're not a commitment for any kind of action. Sometimes they cross the boundary into a letter of commitment with the state stuff, and particularly SBIRs are things that might require matching funds for your proposal submission. In your letter of support, you might also get a state agency or a state organization saying, and if they are successful, we will provide X dollars in matching funds. But again, letters of support, generally not a commitment for action. They're validating what you're talking about at kind of the surface level. Letters of commitment, somewhat different. A letter of commitment is really a commitment to act. All right, so there's kind of skin in the game on this one. An act can take a bunch of different ways, okay? That crossover when I talked to about, which was funding. Yeah, lining up funding is important. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, for example, we've got the Virginia Innovation Partnership the Commission Consortium, something along those lines. It used to be named something different. But one of the things they'll do for Virginia companies, and most states have something like this, is they will help and indicate a commitment to provide funding on some of these SBIRs to help you with your matching funds, or for other things you're going after, contracts or things like that that require matching funds. Second thing, you might have somebody who's committing to be part of a performance team. So if I've got a bunch of subs, or I'm indicating I've got some working partners in something I'm going to do, getting letters of commitment from those folks saying, yes, we're on board. We look forward to working with these guys to make the stuff go forward. We are going to provide a person. We're going to provide this kind of expertise. That's being part of your performance thing. Use of resources might be something along the lines of, say you have a data analytics solution, but you need training data to do something, right? So you might, in some cases, have an organization that says, and we are willing to share our database on this particular topic for them to use to train their AI machine learning solution. Committing to the use of resources. Committing to be part of your advisory and discovery support. What does that mean? Saying, hey, and we'll make ourselves available to make sure what they're doing keeps aligned with with industry, and provide them appropriate suggestions and guidance as things go along. Second to last one, I'd like this one. Somebody who's committing to a pilot. So when they reach should they successfully reach phase 2 and they're ready to pilot it, we are willing to pilot this particular capability using our resources or our location. We're willing to have them put their minimal viable product on our site so they can do the testing and get the feedback to really make this solution of value to the world. Okay. And the last one, probably the rarest one, but I've seen this before, purchases for commitment for purchases, which is say something along the lines of, if they do X, Y, and Z, we commit to buying so many of their units when they're ready. We understand their timeline is their development cycle's long. It's 5 years, it's 3 years, it's whatever, but we're committing with best intent that we're going to purchase those things. Pretty strong stuff, letters of commitment. Now, one of the things you got to watch is you just can't flood your proposal with these things. Be very judicious about what you want. So how do you plan that? Okay. First question you need to ask yourself is, read the request for proposal or the federal opportunity announcement, or whatever form or fashion, the challenge announcement, whatever the rule set is, what they're asking for. That's your minimum bar. So if they say, we don't require letters of commitment or letters of support, you don't need to do any. Probably makes sense to do some, but you don't need to. If they say you need letters of commitment from potential future customers, you got to target that and you got to go after that. So next line is, okay, I know the baseline requirements. What letters and what types will help me make my strongest case? And think about the type of themes you're trying to hit. My themes might be, I'm putting together a good team that's willing. I'm trying to say we've got a long track record and we're really competent in doing stuff. And I'm trying to say that industry's on board and is willing to use my solution. That's 3 different types of, letters right there. Okay. That's what, and then you ask, how many do I want? Who do I want to ask? Right? How do I reach them? And think about your messaging. Okay. My messaging, my timelines and deadlines. And it goes back to that planning thing we talked about earlier. Plan it out. Okay. Then you can hold yourself to a timeline. And, particularly if things like SBIRs or challenges that you're going after that have fixed submission dates, you need to lay yourself out. You need to lay a timeline line out for yourself. Some helpful hints. Start early. It always takes longer to get these things than you think, and you find out that the person who has to sign it is in Papua New Guinea on vacation with their family at a resort that has no communications or something like that. Starting early avoids that kind of stuff. Make it easy on them. Offer/provide a draft. I do this all the time. I will write up a kind of a draft letter of commitment or a draft, more on the letter of support, but sometimes on the letter of commitment. Commitment, they often want to write their own stuff. But at least on letter of support, a draft. Here's the bullet, here's a draft of it. Or on commitment, here are the bullet points I'd like you to hit. These are the things I'm looking for you to express in the letter. And here's some draft copy for you to use. And set a deadline with them. I've had it where I've had letters of commitment come in a week after the proposal went in. Just you're not top of mind on most of the places you're talking to as you're doing this stuff. The next one I really like, if you're getting a letter of support or commitment from them, they're almost your cheerleaders for a particular project. So following up with them, if you win the darn thing, these are prime people that you can now go back to and do sort of that industry business problem discovery around, because they kind of got skin in the game on your success. So engaging them with that sense of ownership and doing your follow-ups. And then the last one, for your theme areas, you're going to think of who you want to go out and get letters from. But the problem is people travel, people transfer, people forget. It sits in an email box. I like to arrange, at least 2 in the different areas I'm trying to get out, unless I don't want a whole ton of them, and I'm absolutely sure I can get one. But generally, I try to be redundant in these things. So hopefully this is of use. Like I said, this is not prescriptive. This is how you go about it. This is ways of thinking about it. You got to work this stuff in again from the beginning if you want to up your probability of success across the board, success of award, success that you're going to be able to actually have it see the light of day and get out and do good to the world, and the probability that it's going to be sustained over time. You only do that by gaining a good understanding of the industry, the organization, the stakeholders you're doing, and doing some of the things we talked about. The next section we're going to talk about, which is next week, if you're watching this live, is commercialization planning and funding. One of my favorite areas. I like to discover a bit and all that, but it doesn't stop there, right? Once you have a validated business proposition, and you think you have a validated business model, life does not stop. You don't take a pitch deck and make the circuits. I know people who do that. At some point in time, you actually have to do something. And if you're submitting an SBIR, you have to kind of have some of this planning stuff in there anyway. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. We're going to talk about planning, and we're also going to talk about some different strategies in the whole spectrum of funding. Everything's not SBIRs. Everything's not venture capital. There's a more mature way of looking how you're going to fund what you're trying to do. All right. No closing remarks today. And the last part of this is, again, assistance and resources. For this particular opportunity, Department of Energy, they have a great site called Funding Opportunities. You see and they'll list out this SBIR, a whole bunch of other things. The one that was just released, they release it about twice a year. So if you don't get on in this one, be ready to take a look at the next set of topics to go after the next one. And hopefully you have a little bit of a head start. One of the things I also like to point out, let's see, you've got some webinars that they do on different topic areas. We're being supported by the Water Power Technology Office and the Solar Technology and Energy Office. Okay, they've got a bunch of good resources on their sites. One thing I really like about what they do is they've got some pretty good learning modules on how to do various detailed parts of your submissions. I highly recommend folks go to that. PAMS is how you submit this stuff. It's a website. It's pretty quick to use, but that's where you do your submissions. We're past the point of doing a letter of intent, but some of these SBIRs or challenges require you to send in a short letter ahead of time saying, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm planning. And they'll give you feedback. Phase 0, which is support before doing this stuff. There's a support site that will help people with that. A company called Dawnbreaker does a really bang up job, has a great bunch of online tutorials associated with all this. DOE market studies. DOE market studies are great. On most things they put out, they have some sort of information where they've looked at in the market. It's a good place to start. It's not the last place, it's not where you end up, but it's a good place to start. Our friends at the Clean Energy Business Network provide a lot of support across all of these programs. If you go to their particular website, they'll have events like ours and other Power Connectors events listed there. And TABA, anything you're doing, when you get your award, if you need additional assistance, Department of Energy and other agencies will provide additional money if you want to get folks like Open Seas or any of the other folks in there to help you materially with some of the stuff you're doing, as opposed to just pure coaching and things along those lines. That's what TAB is all about. We're coming up kind of the end. The next set of webinars on this will be all around commercialization planning and funding. There's your sign up link. We also run these community sessions, which are just open to everybody, where you can come in, discuss what's on your mind as a group. And both Steve, who you see on here, and myself run office hours. So, and this is associated to this particular program, but we're going to be setting up more going into the future, and we will put those on our website as time goes on. And last, my standard one, we did not invent any of this stuff. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and you see some of the giants here. We talk a lot about lean startup, business model canvases, how to take your ideas, take them to business. These are some of the leaders, Eric Rees, Alex Osterwilder. If you want to know about customer development and customer discovery, Steve Blank's usually considered the guru. You see their sites listed there. That YouTube series is excellent. It's just really sharp and concise. And then at the bottom, that's how you get a hold of me. That's how you get a hold of Steve. And we're here to help you. So with that, have a great rest of your day.